36. Home on Star Island in Miami, which defendants would not have done but for the existence of the scheme. 183. The members of the RICO enterprise all share a common purpose: to enrich themselves financially and sexually at the expense of producers, musicians, writers, creators, and artists by maximizing defendants' revenues through fraudulent means. As set forth herein, defendants benefited financially from their scheme to defraud plaintiff, including by making false representations that claim that loyalty and obedience to Mr. Combs will result in cash payments, $250,000, Grammy Awards, access to future projects, access to famous celebrities, access to famous athletes, a $20 million home on Star Island in Miami. Promises that plaintiff can increase his chances of securing cash payments, $250,000, Grammy Awards, access to future projects, access to famous celebrities, access to famous athletes, a $20 million home on Star Island in Miami by soliciting sex workers, by soliciting prostitutes, by engaging in homosexual acts, by distributing and transporting firearms, by distributing and transporting drugs, ecstasy, cocaine, GHB, ketamine, marijuana, and mushrooms, by involuntarily sleeping with sex workers in the presence of Mr. Combs, and by utilizing their talents and labor to produce music, and other tangible goods and services without compensation, which defendants would not have done but for the existence of the scheme. 184. Upon information and belief, this RICO enterprise has existed for at least 20 years, dating back to the 1999 nightclub shooting in NYC, when Mr. Combs required his then-girlfriend, Jennifer Lopez, to transport his illegal firearm into the NYC nightclub. Mr. Combs forced his then-artist, Shine, to assume responsibility for the shooting of several individuals. Mr. Combs used his power, money, and influence to bribe jurors and witnesses, such as the friend of the shooting victim, Natania Rubin, who reported to law enforcement that she saw Mr. Combs and not Shine pull the trigger and shoot her friend in the face. Natania Rubin later testified at Mr. Combs' criminal trial that she was tying her shoe and may not have seen who shot the gun. She later confessed that Mr. Combs paid her. 185. The RICO enterprise continued throughout the years, including during Mr. Combs's 10-year relationship with his girlfriend, Cassie Ventura. According to Ms. Ventura's civil complaint, this RICO enterprise continued in her relationship when Mr. Combs forced her to carry his gun in her purse, forced her to engage in unwanted sexual acts with male prostitutes/sex workers, forced her to consume dangerous amounts of ecstasy, cocaine, GHB, Case 1:24 CV01457 Document 1 filed February 26, 24 page 36 of 73. 37. Given ketamine, marijuana, and alcohol, and paying a member of his security team $5,000 to blow up the vehicle of Kid Cudi because he was jealous and insecure of their relationship. 186. The RICO enterprise continued from September 2022 to the present day, as evidenced by the hundreds of hours of video and audio recordings in plaintiff's possession. Defendants Sean Combs, Justin Combs, Christina Coram, his assistants, and staff all orchestrated, participated, managed and executed the RICO enterprise by purchasing and distributing ecstasy, cocaine, GHB, ketamine, marijuana, and mushrooms, by purchase and distributing firearms, by requiring the solicitation of sexual encounters with prostitutes, sex workers, and minors, and by forcing artists, creatives, musicians, and producers to utilize their talents and labor to produce music, and other tangible goods and services without compensation. The RICO enterprise has functioned as a continuing unit and maintains an ascertainable structure separate and distinct from the pattern of racketeering activity. 187. The enterprise was characterized by the defendant's pattern of false representations and omissions made by defendants Sean Combs, Justin Combs, Christina Coram, and other current and former members of the defendant's associates and staff to defendants' artists, creatives, musicians, and producers. These false representations and omissions were designed to induce defendants' artists, creatives, musicians, and producers to utilize their talents and labor to produce music and other tangible goods and services without compensation, as well as the solicitation of sexual encounters with prostitutes, sex workers, and minors, and the purchasing and distribution of illegal firearms and drugs. 188 As part of this scheme, defendants required their artists, creatives, musicians, and producers to visit strip clubs wearing exclusive authentic Bad Boy merchandise and to use the name and reputation of Mr. Combs to solicit sex workers and prostitutes. Additionally, Mr. Combs used the prospects of winning Grammy Awards, purchasing $20 million homes, participating in future projects, making $250,000 cash payments, and meeting influential music industry executives such as defendants Lucian Charles Grange and Ethiopia Habtemariam. This pattern of false representations was disseminated to artists, creatives, musicians, and producers who reside in California, Florida, New York, and around the country by defendants based in California and New York under the direction and on behalf of defendants in New York. The dissemination typically used interstate telephone wires, social media messages, and electronic mail. Case 1:24 CV01457 Document 1 filed February 26, 24 page 37 of 73. 38-189. The true nature of defendant's scheme was left undisclosed, was omitted, and or was affirmatively misrepresented, all to fraudulently increase defendants' profits, at least some of which were used to expand the enterprise, causing further injury to Plaintiff Jones and other unwitting artists, creatives, musicians, and producers. 190 defendants profited from the enterprise, and Plaintiff Jones suffered because the enterprise diminished Plaintiff Jones' finances due to 13 months of non-payment and diminished Plaintiff Jones' health through consistent drugging and forced sexual encounters with prostitutes and sex workers. Defendants used the proceeds from this scheme to advance the scheme by funding and operating their marketing machine, including through the use of the mail, social media, word of mouth, and interstate wires to sell the illusion that Mr. Combs was serious about the talents and skills of the artists, creatives, musicians, and producers, and wanted to use those skills to make music when nothing could be further from the truth. Defendants provided their artists, creatives, musicians, and producers with this misrepresentative information, including via email all over interstate wireline communications systems and obtaining free labor, the distribution of drugs and firearms, as well as prostitutes, sex workers, and minors. Defendants obtained revenue via wire transfers, documents, and banking transactions that were exchanged via electronic means over interstate wires, thereby growing the enterprise and causing further injury to Plaintiff Jones as described. Throughout 191 the defendant's scheme was reasonably calculated to deceive Plaintiff Jones, artists, creatives, musicians, and producers of ordinary prudence and comprehension through the execution of their complex and illegal scheme to misrepresent the effectiveness of soliciting prostitutes, sex workers, and minors and distributing drugs and guns that did not, would not, and could not lead to securing Grammy Awards, purchasing $20 million homes, participating on future projects, $250,000 cash payments, and meeting influential music industry executives such as defendants Lucian Charles Grange and Ethiopia Habtemariam. Plaintiff Jones would not have lived with Mr. Combs for 13 months, missing birthdays, holidays, and family events, but for the illegal racketeering scheme operated by defendants. 192 defendants each had the specific intent to participate in the overall RICO enterprise and the scheme to defraud Plaintiff Jones, and each participated in the enterprise as follows. 193. Defendants Lucian Charles Grange, Ethiopia Habtemariam, Combs Global, Motown Records, Love Records, and Universal Music Group control and participate in the activities. Case 1:24 CV01457 Document 1. Filed February 26, 24 page 38 of 73. 39 of the enterprise in a variety of ways as set forth herein, including but not limited to developing and marketing scores of writing camps, and listening parties services that are marketed to innocent, unassuming artists, creatives, musicians, and producers who are vulnerable and in seek of opportunities to work and share their craft. 194 throughout the relevant period, defendants Lucian Charles Grange, Ethiopia Habtemariam, Combs Global, Motown Records, Love Records, and Universal Music Group oversaw the activities of defendants Sean Combs, Justin Combs, Christina Coram, and other current and former members of the defendants' associates and staff, collectively, individual defendants. Defendants Lucian Charles Grange, Ethiopia Habtemariam, Combs Global, Motown Records, Love Records, and Universal Music Group has an ethical obligation as respondent superior to supervise the actions and activities of the individual defendants. Defendant Solution Charles Grange, Ethiopia Habtemariam, Combs Global, Motown Records, Love Records, and Universal Music Group failed miserably to do so. Individual defendants relied on the mail, email, social media, and the telephone to distribute advertisements to secure artists, creatives, musicians, and producers whom they would promise Grammy Awards, purchasing $20 million homes, participating on future projects, $250,000 cash payments, and meeting powerful music industry executives such as Defendant Solution Charles Grange, Ethiopia Habtemariam. These advertisements originated from and were sent from Defendant Solution Charles Grange, Ethiopia Habtemariam, Combs Global, Motown Records, Love Records, and Universal Music Group's offices in the state of New York to consumers in New York and around the country, relying on the mail, email, social media messenger, and telephone to distribute and interstate wires to disseminate the misleading information described herein as well as to receive profits from the artists, creatives, musicians, and producers. 195 In connection with defendants acting from New York, these defendants used the mail and interstate wires to solicit Plaintiff Jones and artists, creatives, musicians, and producers, and to use Plaintiff Jones and the artists, creatives, musicians, and producers to utilize their talents and labor to produce music, and other tangible goods and services, without compensation, as well as the solicitation of sexual encounters with prostitutes, sex workers, and minors, and the purchasing and distribution of illegal firearms and drugs. Each of these acts was undertaken Case 1:24 CV 01457 Document 1 filed February 26, 24 page 39 of 73. 40 With the knowledge and approval of all other defendants in furtherance of the goals of their conspiracy. 196 Defendant Solution Charles Grange, Ethiopia Habtemariam, Combs Global, Motown Records, Love Records, and Universal Music Group, directs, controls, and participates in the activities of the enterprise in a variety of ways as set forth herein, including as the employer, parent company, sponsor and respondent superior of defendants Sean Combs, Justin Combs, Christina Coram and other current and former members of the defendants' associates and staff. Throughout the relevant period, Defendant Solution Charles Grange, Ethiopia Habtemariam, Combs Global, Motown Records, Love Records, and Universal Music Group, oversaw the marketing and soliciting of potential artists, creatives, musicians, and producers from their headquarters in New York, California and Florida to consumers in New York, California and Florida, and around the country, relying on the mail, email, social media, text messages, and WhatsApp messages to distribute, interstate wires to disseminate the misleading information described herein as well as to receive profits from the artists, creatives, musicians, and producers from their forced solicitation of sex workers, and the solicitation of sexual encounters with prostitutes, sex workers, and minors, and the purchasing and distribution of illegal firearms and drugs. Each of these acts was undertaken with the knowledge and approval of all other defendants in furtherance of the goals of their conspiracy. 197 Robin Greenhill, the accountant, would ensure the wiring, funds transfer, or cash payments to sex workers. Frankie Santella, Moy Bon, Brendan Paul, and KK would also be responsible for ensuring payment to sex workers in cash. Young Miami, Jade, and Daphne Joy were paid a monthly fee to work as Mr. Combs' sex workers and received payment via wire transfer from Robin Greenhill, which outlined defendants' ongoing criminal operation. 198. During the 10 years preceding the filing of this action and to the present, all defendants did cooperate jointly and severally in the commission of three or more of the predicate acts that are itemized at 18 U.S.C. 1961, 1a, and b, in violation of 18 U.S.C. 1962, d, as described in this complaint. 199 Beginning at an exact date unknown to plaintiff, but within 10 years preceding the filing of this action, defendants have knowingly, willfully, and unlawfully participated in a pattern of racketeering activity that continues to this day. Case 1:24 CV01457 Document 1 filed February 26, 24 page 40 of 73. 41-200. The acts set below, racketeering acts, had the same pattern and purpose to defraud plaintiff for the benefit of defendants. Each racketeering act involved the same or similar methods of commission and participants. 201 Without the repeated predicate acts, the ability to conduct their fraud using the mail and telecommunications wires, and the money laundering, the defendant's business, would not have succeeded. 202 The separate racketeering acts all relate to each other in that they were part of concerted actions by defendants to use the endorsement and channels of the enterprise to operate their businesses to fraudulently induce plaintiff Jones and the artists, creatives, musicians, and producers to utilize their talents and labor to produce music, and other tangible goods and services without compensation, as well as the solicitation of and sexual encounters with prostitutes, sex workers, and minors, and the purchasing and distribution of illegal firearms and drugs. 203 The separate racketeering acts all relate to each other in that they were part of concerted actions by defendants to use the endorsement and channels of the enterprise to operate their businesses to fraudulently induce plaintiff Jones and the artists, creatives, musicians, and producers to utilize their talents and labor to produce music, and other tangible goods and services without compensation, as well as the solicitation of and sexual encounters with prostitutes, sex workers, and minors, and the purchasing and distribution of illegal firearms and drugs. 204 The defendant's wrongful conduct has caused injury to plaintiff Jones, remains a part of their ongoing business practices, and remains a continuing threat to plaintiff Jones and the public. 205 Defendants' association with the enterprise enabled defendants to conduct, direct, and control a pattern of fraudulent, illegal activities over a substantial number of years, which continues to this day. 206 To further their goals, defendants, working in concert, engaged in various forms of criminal activity, including the solicitation of and sexual encounters with prostitutes, sex workers, and minors, and the purchasing and distribution of illegal firearms and drugs. 207 Defendants' ongoing pattern of racketeering activity has injured and continues to injure plaintiff Jones. The defendant's pattern of forcing plaintiff Jones and the artists, creatives, Case 1:24 CV01457 Document 1 filed February 26, 24 page 41 of 73. 42 musicians and producers to solicit sexual encounters with prostitutes, sex workers, and minors, and to purchase and distribute illegal firearms and drugs was the proximate cause of the injuries suffered by plaintiff. Defendants committed multiple acts of mail fraud in violation of 18 U.S.C. 1341 in furtherance of the Enterprise 208. Defendants voluntarily and intentionally devised and participated in a scheme to defraud plaintiffs out of money, in reliance on the mail. Defendants committed these acts with the intent to defraud plaintiff Jones and the artists, creatives, musicians, and producers. 209 Defendants used the mail for the purpose of executing the fraudulent scheme herein. 210 Specifically, defendants agreed to each of the acts of mail fraud described throughout this complaint. In addition, defendants agreed to rely on the mail to secure wire frauds, cash payments from purchasers of the illegal firearms and drugs defendants required others to sell and distribute. 211 In furtherance of and for purposes of executing the above described fraudulent and illegal course of conduct and scheme to defraud, defendants, either individually or in combination with themselves, used and caused to be used the U.S. mail by both placing and causing to be placed cash, letters, marketing materials, advertisements, agreements, and other matters in depositories and by removing or causing to be removed letters and other mailable matters from depositories, in violation of the Mail Fraud Statute, 18 U.S.C. 1341. 212 Defendants could not have furthered their fraud without the use of the mail. For example, defendants sought to acquire wire transfers, cash payments, and to utilize their talents and labor to produce music, and other tangible goods and services without compensation. Defendants also required the mail to distribute misleading advertisements to various states, including New York. For these reasons, The use of mail to conduct fraudulent activity was necessary and inevitable. Defendants committed multiple acts of wire fraud in violation of 18 U.S.C. 1343 in furtherance of the enterprise 213. Defendants voluntarily and intentionally devised and participated in a scheme to defraud plaintiff out of money, in reliance on the mail. Defendants committed these acts with the intent to defraud plaintiff Jones and the artists, creatives, musicians, and producers. 214 specifically. Defendants agreed to each of the acts of wire fraud described throughout this complaint. In addition, defendants agreed to rely on interstate wires to disseminate funds and Case 1:24 CV 01457 Document 1 filed February 26, 24 page 42 of 73. 43 to submit payment to sex workers and prostitutes, as well as to transfer payment for the distribution and procurement of drugs and guns. Defendants illegally acquired wire transfers, money transfers, credit cards, and bank cards via search engines and other online platforms to further their collective goal of furthering their RICO enterprise. Defendants knew that these online purchases were illegally made. 215 Additionally, defendants agreed that defendants should facilitate these fraudulent purchases over interstate wires in furtherance of the fraud. Sex workers and prostitutes nationwide have received payment from defendants. 216 In furtherance of and for purposes of executing the above described fraudulent and illegal course of conduct and scheme or artifice to defraud. Defendants, either individually or in combination with themselves, used or caused to be used interstate wire communications to transmit or disseminate false, fraudulent, and misleading communications and information, in violation of the Wire Fraud Statute, 18 U.S.C. 1343. 217 defendants could not have furthered their fraud without the ability to use telecommunications to share information with clients and retailers nationwide. Because defendants needed to communicate with clients and retailers around the country, the use of interstate telecommunications wires to conduct the fraudulent activity was necessary and inevitable. 218 plaintiffs have been damaged in their business or property because defendants violated 18 U.S.C. 1962, A, C, D, and, therefore, he is entitled to recover the damages and other remedies enumerated therein. 219 defendants' acts or omissions were actuated by actual malice and / or a willful and wanton disregard for the consequences suffered by the plaintiff and / or with knowledge of a high degree of probability of harm to the plaintiff and reckless indifference to the consequences of their acts or omissions. 220 compensatory damages alone will be insufficient to deter such conduct in the future. There needs to be a criminal referral to the United States Justice Department, as well as to the state's Attorney General's office. Wherefore, plaintiff requests that the court issue an order and grant judgment to the plaintiffs as follows. Case 1:24 CV 01457 Document 1 filed February 26, 24 page 43 of 73. 44A granting plaintiff statutory, common law, and punitive damages, and applicable pre- and post-judgment interest, in full recompense for damages. 22B entering judgment according to the declaratory relief sought. C granting plaintiff such other and further relief, including, without limitation, injunctive and equitable relief, as the court deems just in all the circumstances, and D granting plaintiff an incentive or service award reflective of the work done in prosecuting this action, the time spent, the effort and hard costs invested, and results obtained, in light of the court's judgment informed by awards in other similar cases of comparable difficulty and complexity. Second cause of action: sexual assault and sexual harassment, against Mr. Combs, 221. Mr. Jones incorporates by reference all preceding paragraphs and realleges them as if set forth fully herein. 222 As described above, Mr. Combs frightened and placed plaintiff in apprehension of harm when he physically and sexually assaulted him from October 2022 to October 2023 in Mr. Combs' home in Miami, New York, United States Virgin Islands, and Los Angeles. 223 Mr. Combs forcibly touched and attempted and / or threatened to touch plaintiff's intimate areas and / or touched plaintiff with his own intimate body parts. 224 Mr. Combs violently gripped and palmed Mr. Jones' anus and crotch without consent. Mr. Combs forced Mr. Jones to work in Mr. Combs' bathroom and watch Mr. Combs as he showered. Mr. Combs forced Mr. Jones to work in the studio while Mr. Combs stripped naked to get his body massaged. Mr. Combs forced Mr. Jones to work while Mr. Combs walked around naked. 225 As a result of Mr. Combs' conduct, plaintiff has suffered and continues to suffer harm, including physical injury, severe emotional distress, humiliation, anxiety, and other consequential damages for which he is entitled to an award of monetary damages and other relief. 226 The conduct of Mr. Combs described above was willful, wanton, and malicious. At all relevant times, Mr. Combs acted with conscious disregard for plaintiff's rights and feelings, acted with the knowledge of or with reckless disregard for the fact that his conduct was certain to cause injury and or humiliation to plaintiff, and intended to cause fear, physical injury. 22 Damages shall include, but not be limited to, all damages permitted under the New Jersey Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. Case 1:24 CV 01457 Document 1 filed February 26, 24 page 44 of 73. 45 or pain and suffering to plaintiff. By virtue of the foregoing, plaintiff is entitled to recover punitive damages. Third cause of action California's bystander negligent infliction of emotional distress, against Mr. Combs and defendant Justin Combs, 227. Mr. Jones incorporates by reference all preceding paragraphs and realleges them as if set forth fully herein. 228 Mr. Jones brings this claim against Mr. Combs and J. Combs for the CRS shooting of G. 229. The elements of bystander need are 1. Is closely related to the injury victim, 2. Is present at the scene of the injury-producing event at the time it occurs and is then aware that it is causing injury to the victim, and 3. As a result suffer serious emotional distress, a reaction beyond that which would be anticipated in a disinterested witness and which is not an abnormal response to the circumstances. RAV Superior Court. 154 calories App 4th 142, 148, 64 calories RPTR 3D 539, 542, 2007. 230 As detailed above, Mr. Jones was 2 feet away from G, as either J. Combs or Mr. Combs shot him multiple times in the restroom of CRS. As detailed above, Mr. Jones was the only individual that aided G as he laid on the bathroom floor in a fetal position bleeding out. As detailed above, Mr. Combs and J. Combs orchestrated a cover-up, and through Fahim Muhammad, lied to the LAPD and forced Mr. Jones and all of the other attendees of the writers' camp to lie to the police as well. Mr. Combs and J. Combs knew that they shot G in the restroom, and that G was shot as he was leaving the studio. 231 Mr. Combs and J. Combs. Intentional deception caused a delay in G receiving immediate medical care, as the ambulance parked 3 blocks away from CRS out of fear that there was an active shooting. Mr. Jones had to run down the block and convince them that the shooting had ended. 232 These events traumatized Mr. Jones. It caused Mr. Jones to suffer from insomnia, PTSD, severe anxiety, and depression. Additionally, the fear and silence from the remaining witnesses aided in the reinforcement of Mr. Combs' statements that he is untouchable. 233 As a result of Mr. Combs and J. Combs' conduct, plaintiff Jones has suffered and continues to suffer harm, including severe emotional distress, anxiety, and other consequential damages for which he is entitled to an award of monetary damages and other relief. Case 1:24 CV 01457. Document 1 filed February 26, 24 page 45 of 7346 234. The conduct of Mr. Combs and J. Combs described above was willful, wanton, and malicious. At all relevant times, Mr. Combs and J. Combs acted with conscious disregard for plaintiff's rights and feelings, acted with the knowledge of or with reckless disregard for the fact that their conduct was certain to cause injury to plaintiff, and intended to cause fear, physical injury, and or pain and suffering to plaintiff. By virtue of the foregoing, plaintiff is entitled to recover punitive damages. Fourth cause of action sexual assault, against Jane Doe 1, Young Miami's cousin, 235. Mr. Jones incorporates by reference all preceding paragraphs and realleges them as if set forth fully herein. 236 As described above, Jane Doe 1 frightened and placed plaintiff in apprehension of harm when she physically and sexually assaulted him on Thanksgiving Day 2022, in Mr. Combs' home in Miami, Florida. 237 Jane Doe 1 forcibly touched and attempted and or threatened to touch plaintiff's intimate areas and or touched plaintiff with her own intimate body parts. Jane Doe 1 used her mouth and performed oral sex on plaintiff while he was urinating in the restroom. Plaintiff fought her off, while Mr. Combs and his associates sat outside loudly laughing. Jane Doe 1 then followed Mr. Jones outside of the restroom and began undressing in front of Mr. Combs and his associates, straddled Mr. Jones and attempted to have forced sexual intercourse with him. 238 As a result of Jane Doe 1's conduct, plaintiff has suffered and continues to suffer harm, including physical injury, severe emotional distress, humiliation, anxiety, and other consequential damages for which he is entitled to an award of monetary damages and other relief. 239 The conduct of Jane Doe 1 described above was willful, wanton, and malicious. At all relevant times, Jane Doe 1 acted with conscious disregard for plaintiff's rights and feelings, acted with the knowledge of or with reckless disregard for the fact that her conduct was certain to cause injury and or humiliation to plaintiff, and intended to cause fear, physical injury, and or pain and suffering to plaintiff. By virtue of the foregoing, plaintiff is entitled to recover punitive damages. Case 1:24 CV 01457 Document 1 filed February 26, 24 page 46 of 73. If you or anyone you know is being exploited sexually, call the National Hotline. As you leave the page, don't forget to hit the like bell and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so as yet. Thank you for watching.